Resident Evil 3 Remake is one of my favorite games. It's a very special game to me because it is the game that got me into the Resident Evil franchise. It's certainly not the most loved of the modern Resident Evil games and does get a fair bit of hate, and we're going to talk a little bit about that later on. But for me personally, this is my favorite Resident Evil game. However, since RE3's release in 2020, we have also had Resident Evil 4 Remake, which has set the standard for not just what a good RE remake should be, but what a good video game remake should be. So for this video, I wanted to revisit this game now that it is 3 years old, and look at this game not just from the perspective of an RE remake and how it holds up compared to the others, but also look at it from the perspective of a game in its own right. And while I do have some bias towards this game for sure, there are definitely some critiques I have of it, and at the end of the video we will kind of round it all up with a nice little conclusion. And as just a final note before we get into it, I am playing this on PC, so throughout this video I will be installing some different outfit mods for no real reason other than just because I can. By the way, this is the first time I'm properly playing this in 4K. This game looks great in 4K. Obviously it looks like shit now because of all the effects, but when she was looking in the mirror just before, it looked fantastic. Oh, look at that. Look at the detail in 4K is crazy. Yeah, as you can tell, I'm kind of newer to 4K gaming. What I find interesting here is, see how there's a big light over there? When you move over here, that light doesn't exist. Look at the state of these dishes and the stove and the food. Like, I get Jill probably doesn't give a fuck right now, but like, there is no way Jill's apartment isn't filled with cockroaches. Like, there's just no way. That's not how this works. This is excellent use of first person as well. I'm in the camp that RE games should stay in third person. I think it worked fine for RE7, but I still think it should have been a choice. And one of my big criticisms of Village is that that game didn't really justify its first person perspective at all. The shift from playing as Jill to her perspective really helps convey the idea that Jill is suffering from trauma and PTSD after the mansion incident. We can see that she is consuming herself investigating Umbrella. So going from her perspective in the nightmare and being able to see up close the condition of her apartment afterwards really helps make it more personal, and it's a great insight into the mental state of the character and a nice little touch of character development that you really can only get from the remakes. I do wish the game played into the idea a little bit more, but nevertheless it still works great for this opening sequence. But what's interesting about this opening bit is there is actually a clone of Jill on the other side of this wall, and whenever you walk around, she is walking and doing the exact same actions that you are. And the reason why that happens is because when you go in here and you look into the mirror to see your reflection, that's actually a clone of Jill that's in a space opposite this wall. It's not a real reflection. If we head through the door here, we actually look at this, there's a ghost apartment. And what's interesting is here's another model of Jill. So if I lock the camera to this position and then unlock character movement and move around, I am currently moving around in the other room, and the ghost of Jill is just copying any movements that I make, which is really interesting. And this version of Jill actually plays through the entire animation in front of the mirror, so it's not actually a reflection, which I actually thought was really cool. It's sometimes interesting to see how games are kind of made behind the scenes. And now, as you can see, look at the quality there. See how that's changed? Now we're looking at a reflection. If I free cam once again, there's no longer another room there. So that is only specifically for that first person bit. I have to say, I absolutely love Jill's redesign in this game. I think she looks absolutely fantastic. Like the jeans and the tank top, very reminiscent of the reboot Lara Croft. I think it works really well, and it's actually an outfit that kind of matches a lot of her other appearances in the franchise. I don't really know what their reasoning for redesigning the outfit is, but in terms of just having some consistency across the franchise, I think this outfit definitely fits a lot more than the original. Later on in the advent calendar, I'm actually going to be revisiting the original Resident Evil 3 for the very first time, so I thought it'd be important to kind of cover this game first to kind of get a benchmark on what my thoughts and opinions are on Resident Evil 3, and then kind of go back to the original and see what I think of that. So look out for that later on down the line. One thing I absolutely love about the newer Resident Evil games is just how the RE engine looks. The RE engine not only looks fantastic, but it does lighting so well. Like, the lighting from the fire in the corridor then, like, it always just looks incredible. I'm always blown away by how RE games look. I'm just going to avoid pretty much all the zombies in this opening bit. The opening bit's very linear, but we're eventually going to end up, after this kind of like opening set piece, we're eventually going to end up in a kind of hub area. That's alright, take your time, Jill. Don't worry about the zombies that are there. This game sounds absolutely fantastic through headphones. Alright, we're coming up to the iconic introduction to Nemesis. Oh yeah, I know I just said it before, but the lighting in this game, absolutely fantastic. One thing I love in this game is the characterizations of both Jill and Carlos and how that kind of relationship develops throughout the game. Kind of starts out in these early parts here where there's like a real distrust of Carlos because he's Umbrella soldier, I guess. How that relationship kind of develops over the course of the game. It's really well done and really well written. For such a short game, it feels very natural, which is one thing I've always loved, and I think the performances Jill and Carlos help really elevate that as well. Here's the other thing, I love how sassy this version of Jill is.
I know what a radio is.
The sass is real. I love it. I think this is such a great interpretation of Jill Valentine. And the other thing this game has is also you can do a quick step, so you can actually press the R1 button and you can do a dodge. So if a zombie gets close to you, you can just kind of dodge them, and you can pretty much do it in every direction. There is a limit to how much you can do it though. Jill actually will stop doing it if you do it too much. So for example, if I go here and I dodge along like this several times, she can only do it 3 times, and she kind of stumbles a bit on that 3rd time. It's a good way to prevent you from abusing that mechanic. To be honest, like, I think my favorite outfits is the default outfit, but I do like Jill's classic outfit as well. I think it looks pretty good. I'm not a big fan of the STARS outfit. I think her hat, I know it's like an iconic look for Jill from RE1, but I just think her hat looks a bit silly, if I'm being completely honest. Oh, here we go. Here's a bunch of boys coming to get me. Now, this will be a good test of performance. We'll see how well this deals. So far, this has been an incredibly smooth performance on the settings I have. And yeah, that big explosion there didn't actually affect performance, so that's quite nice. So the first outfit we're going to be looking at is this one here. Now this is actually the official RE version of Jill's battlesuit outfit from RE5. And I'm never going to get used to this model of Jill Valentine having the blonde ponytail. It looks weird. Because obviously the Resident Evil games involve a lot of backtracking, and one example of how the games kind of force you to backtrack is you get these little saves, and these saves are everywhere in Resident Evil 2 in the RPD. You actually have to find the codes and then come back to them. And this game is a lot more linear than RE2 is. Like, RE2 is a linear game as well, but there's a lot more, like, a lot of the game is set in the RPD, so there's a lot of backtracking and going through and repeating the same environments in RE2 than what there is in this game. Oh wow, that was a good shot. Fucking hell, I wasn't expecting that. This game has a lot of more open hub areas, like smaller little areas, rather than like larger environments to do backtracking. So there is a little backtracking in this game, but not as much as what you would expect from Resident Evil games. I'm just gonna take these guys out now, just so they won't be a problem later on. But yeah, now we got the hose, so we now have to backtrack to the earlier part of the level where the alley was, so we can put the fire out and move on to the next stage of this opening section. And as you can see, we've got a shotgun here, which we are going to need to come back and get a little bit later once we have the means to. And the good thing about, like I said, replaying the game is I can actually go to my item box, and I actually already have a pair of bolt cutters. I don't need to pick them up later on. I'm actually going to do that now just so I can get the shotgun. But on a first playthrough, you wouldn't have access to bolt cutters straight away Like this early stage in the game, you have very little inventory space, so it actually makes a lot of sense to store a lot of your items. I'm not going to worry about using a grenade this earlier on in the game. I'll keep that out just in case I find some more. But yeah, it's one thing I really like about these games is the inventory management. And of course, there's different types of items as well. So we got a first aid spray, which is fantastic. I'll save that for later on in the game. But you can combine different types of items. So like, for example, we got that shotgun there, so I need to go back and get that shotgun actually, because that's the whole reason I got the bolt cutters. I forgot to do it. But if you combine high grade gunpowder with the standard gunpowder, you get shotgun shells, which is pretty good. Yeah, normally you pick up the bolt cutters and you go through the level and then you come back for this later, but I'm just going to grab it now. It's going to come in handy in a minute. And if you want to get access to the safe code, here it is right here. So it's 937. So if we head back, and sometimes you'll find the codes in like the documents and things that you can pick up. Other times you'll see them like that in the environment. And so that was on the wall there. And there we go. We unlocked the safe just like that. And this gives us a dot sight for the handgun, which we can't pick up right now. I need to go back down to my inventory and clear that. It is never not satisfying blowing up zombies like that. And I want to talk about this game's combat in a little bit. We are going to move a bit later on in the game so I can talk about the combat. But yeah, for this early section, I wanted to kind of focus more on kind of how the Resident Evil levels built and made. And as you can see, we've got the bolt cutters here, which I'm not going to bother picking up because I already have them. Before I move on to the next section of the video, I do want to briefly talk about my relationship with the Resident Evil franchise, because it's a bit of a roller coaster. You see, prior to RE3R's release, I wasn't really a fan of the franchise. I was always fascinated by the lore, but never really got into the games. Most of my exposure to the franchise was actually the Milla Jovovich films, but my favorite character from those films was Jill Valentine. So when RE3 was revealed, I was pretty hyped, and I thought it was going to be a good jumping on point for the series for me. So I decided to play RE2 prior to the release, and I really loved that game. However, after RE3R, my experience with Village left me questioning whether or not I actually was a fan of this franchise, as at the time I did not like the game at all. I didn't like the animated series from that year. I didn't like the Welcome to Raccoon City movie. So for a while there, I thought maybe I'm not really a Resident Evil fan, and maybe I'm just more of a Jill Valentine fan. But in retrospect, I think a couple of years later, in retrospect, I do appreciate Village a lot more. And I think I can say I am a fan and enjoy the franchise. I'm just not a hardcore Resident Evil fan, and I mostly just enjoy the newer games, but never say never. Maybe one day I'll play all of them, who knows. And so far, like at the time of recording this, so far the only Resident Evil games I've played is basically all the remakes, Resident Evil 7, Village, and I've actually played Resident Evil 5 in the past. I also did play Resident Evil Revelations. And out of all of those games, this one is still my favorite so far. The other thing I like about this game is, like, Resident Evil games are designed to be replayable, but what I really love about this game is just how replayable this game actually is. And I know a lot of Resident Evil fans will disagree with this, because a lot of Resident Evil fans do not like this game. I'm actually infected with a parasite right now, so if I just use the green herb, that gets rid of the parasite. There is actually a mod you can get for this game where you can press a button and it actually just causes Jill to vomit. I am going to skip the rest of this section of the game because I want to skip to the Nemesis bit, but I am going to close out by saying that the reason why I love this game so much is just because of how much I love this interpretation of Jill, and also the fact that Jill's my favorite character. There hasn't been another character in this franchise that has overtaken her in that spot. But also, this game is a short game. It's a 5-hour game, or even less when you really know what you're doing and you can just smash through it. And I actually replayed this game on the Steam Deck, and it's definitely a perfect Steam Deck game. I love short games. I don't like long, big games a lot of the time. So being able to play a short game like Resident Evil 3, knowing that I can get it done in a couple of hours is actually really nice. And obviously it's always going to be my favorite one because it is special for me. It is the one that got me into the franchise. So, you know, it's always going to hold a special place in my heart, obviously. So here we have an alternative mod for the RE5 battle suit, and this is actually the one I prefer. I think this outfit looks a lot better with Jill's standard hair, but in comparison, I also think the suit itself is a lot more detailed. There's a lot more detail in what the fabric of the suit looks like, and I think the quality of this design is a lot better than the reverse version of the outfit. And the other alternative outfit I want to showcase is this mod here. This is an alternative version of the classic outfit, and this one's actually a lot more in line with the original Resident Evil 3. But I also think just the design of this is actually a lot better than what Capcom offered in this game. The other thing I like about this version of the mod is you can actually download various alternatives to this. So you can get versions without the sweater, you can get versions without the gun belt, so you actually have a bit of customizability with this mod. So for those familiar with Resident Evil 3, will also know that this is the first time we encounter Nemesis. Oh, here he is. As I run away from Nemesis here, I want to talk about why Nemesis is one of the more disappointing aspects of this game. He is meant to be a stalker character, right? The Resident Evil games have all these stalker characters, but in... I'm going to go in the safe room because he can actually follow you in here. There he is. I've kind of cornered myself over here, so I'm going to have to go run the long way around because he's kind of stuck here. But this is actually an example of why Nemesis isn't as good as Mr. X, because his AI can follow me into this restaurant, but once I'm inside the safe room, his AI doesn't know what to do. So he just kind of stands around in here, and as soon as I walk past the threshold of the safe room, then he starts coming for me. And outside of that, his AI just does not know what to do. Where with Mr. X, for example, Mr. X would actually follow you around the place, and he would kind of have his own path that he would kind of walk around and patrol within the RPD. This is the only part of the entire game where Nemesis actually plays the role of the stalker. All of his other appearances in this game are either scripted set-piece segments or boss fights. And in comparison to Mr. X from Resident Evil 2, this is quite a downgrade. One of the aspects of Resident Evil 2 that I loved the most was the fact that Mr. X would stalk you around the RPD for pretty much the entire game. It really added a lot of tension to the gameplay. You know, as you went around the RPD, backtracking, trying to solve puzzles, get keys, access areas that you couldn't access earlier. Having that presence constantly there really upped the tension. It's very similar to Alien Isolation. In Resident Evil 3, because Resident Evil 3 is so linear, there isn't really a big open area like the RPD where you can have Nemesis stalk you around. Instead, you've got this little small section of Raccoon City, and it's very difficult for Nemesis to fulfill that stalker role because he's very easy to avoid, and like I said, outside of this area you only see him in scripted encounters. And yeah, we'll circle back round to Nemesis in a little bit because I do want to talk about the Nemesis boss fights in the game. So we have skipped forward a little bit in the game to the nest sequence, and I have also changed Jill's appearance again. And that's kind of what I wanted to do with this video, is showcase some mods that are of Jill's other outfits in the franchise. And the reason why we have jumped forward to the nest section of the game is because there's quite a few different enemy types in this part of the game, which makes it the perfect section to kind of talk about this game's combat. We haven't really talked about combat so far in this video, but you have seen it play out, and it's pretty straightforward combat. It's got 4 different slots for weapons. You can have pistols, you can have shotguns. I've got a grenade launcher for this part of the game for an enemy type we'll encounter soon. But you can also have like your assault rifles as well. I've got the infinite ammo one. You can actually buy from the bonus game store. Obviously, the different weapon types are useful for different enemies. I think this has to go in here from memory. And basically, our objective of this part of the game is we need to gather the resources to be able to produce a vaccine in the machine that's upstairs there. As you can see, these enemies take quite a bit to take down, and they can actually regenerate health as well. So if you don't take them down quick enough, they'll just heal themselves. I've just got the assault rifle just so I could quickly take the enemies out here. As you can see, there's another one up here. Let's get him before he comes down. Oh, hang on. Is he dead yet? Let's just knife him just to make sure. Oh, there's another one over there. And these enemies actually move a little bit quicker than the zombies as well. This one's kind of stuck. And yeah, one thing about this game is, unlike with Resident Evil 2, where the focus of the game is a lot more on survival horror style gameplay, you know, there are limited resources, limited ammo. This game is much more action focused, which means no matter what level you're playing, there is a lot of ammo and resources lying around the place. You never really feel like you're in any danger like you do with the other Resident Evil games. This is a similar criticism I have for Resident Evil Village as well, because in Resident Evil Village, it's very similar to this. It's much more action focused and definitely doesn't feel like you're in any danger at any point in time. This is why personally I prefer the gameplay style of Resident Evil 2 over this. Like, this game is fun. I actually really enjoy just casually playing this game. I love being able to dodge enemies, and when you perfect the perfect dodge, it's always a lot of fun. I love that there's all these different enemy types, not just zombies. Like, as you can see, we've got another tentacle boy over here. We got two of them actually. Hold on. We might need our grenade to deal with this. Let's just throw that down there. And you got to... Oh, shit, that didn't work at all, did it? And you got a lot of different weapon types to deal with any situation the game throws at you. I think the fact that this game is more of a linear game definitely does help with the action. I think if the game was longer, you would probably need more slower paced sections. God, this guy takes a lot to take down. Come on. Oh, hang on. There we go. Got him there. I thought he was going to fully recharge. I just ran out of ammo. But they are very replayable games, and that is mostly because they are fun and engaging games to play. And whether it is the more action-focused titles like Resident Evil 3 or Resident Evil Village, or whether it's the bonkers ones like, you know, Resident Evil 6 or whatever, or if it's one of the more survival horror focused ones, they're still engaging, and these games have a lot of replay value. And this one for me, a lot of that comes down to the fact that it is shorter than the other games. And I get that there's a lot of people that were disappointed with the length of this game in particular. It definitely doesn't hold up in comparison to the second game. There's a lot, I understand that a lot of people, you know, don't like the fact that there's a lot of cut content. And I understand the criticisms of the cut content. This game is missing a big section of the original game, which is the clock tower. This game skips over that. The other thing that this game doesn't have is a lot of puzzles. Resident Evil 2 and like games like Resident Evil 7 and that have a lot of puzzles, where like this one here, like there's only really a couple of examples of puzzles. And so in that department, this is also a little bit weaker as well. There are a lot of aspects that I do prefer in some of the other Resident Evil games, but this one's just more fun to me. And that's just really all it comes down to at the end of the day. And oh look, here we go, Nemesis is back. Right here is an example of one of the scripted Nemesis sequences. Like, this is basically just a cutscene where you do have to do some slight input, but there's really nothing more to it than that. This is just an example of just how disappointing Nemesis can be in this game. However, like I said, there are some Nemesis boss fights, and we are actually about to encounter a Nemesis boss fight. And for this final part of the video, I thought I would also change out the outfit once again, this time to the wetsuit outfit, which is the outfit that Jill wears in Resident Evil Revelations. To be honest, I actually think all the Nemesis boss fights are really good. There's 3 main Nemesis boss fights in the game, and each of them is like a different stage of Nemesis. And then the last one honestly can't really be counted as a boss fight, as Nemesis is just kind of standing there and you just have to kind of dodge his attacks and shoot the things. It's a very weak boss fight to end the game on. This boss fight that I'm playing here now is a much stronger boss fight, and this is actually my favorite of the Nemesis boss fights in the game. I might actually equip the explosive rounds to start off with. I don't want to use all my flame rounds at once. But basically, this is my favorite boss battle in the entire game. And the boss battles, you know, I've always found the boss battles in Resident Evil to be really fun for the most part. And this one is definitely the best of the Nemesis boss fights in this game. There's a bunch of additional zombies that come around, but we basically need to shock Nemesis. We just have to do that a couple of times. So in a sec, he's going to jump up. and some zombies are going to actually come out. So I'm going to save my shotguns for the zombies. You got to kind of keep an eye on where Nemesis is going around, and then you shoot whichever tank he stops at. And then you shoot that, but also note that there are still zombies here. And then it's actually great, you can actually use Nemesis to take out the zombies. So if you're smart with what you do, you can kind of just avoid Nemesis entirely. Number 3, and you only have limited time to do it, by the way, so we'll do that one. We'll grab this, and that'll damage him a bit. Let me just take out this zombie. It's just, this fight's just a matter of dodging his attacks, and kind of with each wave he gets new attacks, so it's pretty standard Resident Evil stuff. Nice, we got him. I think that's, oh no, he's getting back up again. The grenade, this is what whenever I play Resident Evil 3, I always save my grenade launcher for this part of the game, because this is when you really need it. Alright, is this the end? Have I done it? I think we've got him. I think that's it. Or maybe it's not. Maybe I spoke too soon. See, that mag is fucking awesome. It does a lot of damage. That's it. I've only got acid rounds now. This better be towards the edge, surely. I don't have any flame things. Is that it? Have I got him? I got him. I thought I was going to have to continue doing that. To be fair, this cutscene is badass. But yeah, that's a really fun boss fight. I really enjoy that. And like I said, I think all the Nemesis boss fights are really a lot of fun. Fuck, look at that. That jaw's fucked. But kind of as this cutscene plays, that kind of brings us to the end of the video. Overall, I think Resident Evil 3 does get a bad rap. I mean, I know a lot of people don't like this as much as the other remakes, and that's absolutely fair enough, but it's just a really fun game to play, and it's definitely, like, when I'm thinking about replaying a Resident Evil game, this is always the one that I come back to. You know, I don't go back to playing the other ones a lot, because I just love this game so much. And personally, in my opinion, that Nemesis boss fight should have been the final boss fight for Nemesis in this game, because the final actual Nemesis quote-unquote boss isn't very good. Overall, I do think this game does hold up very well, and while it may not be a lot of people's favourite of the remakes, and I think is certainly not the best one for sure, I think it does work well as a nice companion piece to Resident Evil 2 Remake. I think as a game on its own, however, it really does shine. The game is well paced, even if it is a little bit shorter, and the gameplay still holds up well. There is of course a discussion to be had about whether the length justifies the price, and about whether this game is worth it with all the cut content, but that is not really the discussion we are having here today. All I will say is, for me personally, I love the length of this game, and the value of a game for me really comes from the fun factor, and most importantly the characters and the story. And with RE3 Remake, I am very much invested in this version of Jill, and I love replaying this game. I do, however, think it is fair to judge this game in comparison to the original, if you wish, but I do think there is a lot of hate that this game gets that is unjustified, because as a game in its own right, it is still very much a banger. Anyway, that's it from me. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video, even if you did disagree with me. I do acknowledge that my perspective on this game is a very niche perspective, but I hope you still got something out of it. And if you did, I would greatly appreciate you dropping a like. And if you like retrospective content, then consider subscribing. Thanks for watching. Bye for now.